Here's what's coming up on the program today. Former U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell dies of COVID complications at the age of 84. British lawmakers pay tribute to slain MP David Amess. Plus, death toll rises in floods that hit the Indian state of Kerala. Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us on the program. I'm Amarachi Ubani in Lagos. We begin with tributes pouring in for former U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell, who died today from COVID complications at the age of 84. His family, who broke the news, said he had been fully vaccinated. Local media said he had previously been diagnosed with multiple myeloma, a type of blood cancer, and Parkinson's disease, both of which have made him more susceptible to COVID symptoms. Mr. Powell became the first African-American Secretary of State in 2001 under then-President George W. Bush. A former president has described him as a great public servant, a family man, and a friend who was such a favorite of presidents that he earned the Presidential Medal of Freedom twice. Former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair, who worked with Powell during the early years of the Iraq War, of which Powell supported, said he was someone of immense capability and integrity who was a great companion with a lovely and self-deprecating sense of humor. Powell broke with his party to endorse Barack Obama in 2008. He became a trusted military advisor to a number of leading U.S. politicians. He also saw service and was wounded in Vietnam, an experience that later helped define his own military and political strategies. Our correspondent is in Washington, Maria Bird. Maria, the tributes have been pouring in. What has President Joe Biden said about Colin Powell?
Yes, Amarachi, thank you for having me. You're exactly correct. The tributes have been pouring in, and it is clear that America has lost a major hero today. And our president has recently submitted a statement on behalf of himself and the First Lady, stating that they have sent their deepest condolences. And obviously, General Colin Powell was a friend of theirs, as the president worked in Congress very closely with him when he was the Joint Chiefs of Armed Forces. And so that is, one of those individuals that I think will continue to have a lasting impact on the American history.
What are other Americans saying about him?
Other Americans, I think, are, whether or not they're Republican or Democrat, they're saying that they have, just seen someone of high integrity and dignity. That is a constant message that you're hearing from the American community, especially those who worked closely with him as he worked through several administrations. He even worked with the Reagan administration. So he was a longtime statesman in the U.S. And one that, as you know, worked across the world when he served as Secretary of State under George W. Bush. And so we are obviously, as a country, looking for who will be the next General Colin Powell. And I was privileged to have met him before and have interviewed his wife. And so definitely individuals that I think will continue to be remembered in America.
Indeed, and that will be some really big shoes to fill, Maria. A family says he died from COVID complications, and they believe underlying illnesses may have made things worse. How long was he ill for, and how is the family dealing with the grief of losing him?
Multiple myeloma, the blood cancer that they are stating that was part of the complications, that is one that unfortunately moves pretty quickly. And because we've been in the state of COVID now for 18 months, it's a bit unclear as to exactly how long he was ill. They're saying he has been struggling for quite some time. But, we know that prior to COVID, he was definitely very much still active, maybe not as active as he was when he was a statesman, but he was still very much serving as an advisor to many individuals that within even the Obama administration. And we know that he actually was not a major fan of the last administration, but he was continuing to advise and provide guidance to many of those, whether they were in the White House or in Congress. So this illness is one that in our what we know right now is it's really a more recent within the last year. And we know too that with the COVID complications, and people keep talking about the fully vaccinated, which he was fully vaccinated. They have not yet said whether or not he had a booster. So they also have not identified when he exactly received his initial COVID vaccine. And when you're talking about the blood cancer that existed, and we know that you can still contract COVID with the vaccine, it just reduces the likelihood of being hospitalized. So I think there needs to be a little clarity as it relates to the COVID complications component.
Maria, thanks for clearing things up for us and bringing us up to speed on this and for reaching out to us to give us an update. Well, also reacting to Colin Powell's demise is U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, who hailed him as one of the greatest leaders ever witnessed. Austin made the comment in Tbilisi, Georgia. He called Powell a tremendous friend and mentor.
The world lost one of the greatest leaders that we have ever witnessed. Alma lost a great husband, and the family lost a tremendous father. And I lost a tremendous personal friend and mentor. He has been my mentor for a number of years. He always made time for me, and I could always go to him with tough issues. He always had great counsel. We will certainly miss him. I feel as if I have a hole in my heart just learning of this just recently. First African-American chairman of the Joint Chiefs, first African-American Secretary of State, a man who was respected around the globe and who will be, quite frankly, it is not possible to replace a Colin Powell. We will miss him. Again, my thoughts and prayers go out to the family, and we're deeply, deeply saddened to learn of this. Thank you.
Thanks. I want to bring in Melvin Foote, his president, Constituency for Africa, a 25-year-old Washington, D.C.-based network organizations, groups and individuals committed to the progress and empowerment of Africa and African people worldwide. Mr. Foote had several encounters with Mr. Powell, especially within the capacity of the CFA, one example of which is while preparing for his visit to Africa in the first week of June 2001, Mr. Powell solicited input from the CFA, which had been vocal on America's Africa policies and did not seem like a potential ally of the Bush administration. Mr. Foote joins me now from Washington, D.C. Thank you for joining me on the program, Mr. Melvin Foote. It's a pleasure having you here.
It's great to be here.
Let's begin with the first time that you encountered Mr. Powell. What were your first impressions of him?
Well, my first impression, you were absolutely awed to be in his presence. You kind of felt like you were in the presence of Nelson Mandela or a president of the United States. He did not demand attention, but you could tell that he demanded respect. I was very impressed and awed by him, but he made you feel real comfortable. As soon as you started talking to him, he made you feel like, hey, these are two friends that are talking. So that was my first impression.
Indeed. And for many people, people like the U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin describing him as, one of those friends and mentors, an irreplaceable leader, someone who will be hard to replace. He also consulted the CFA on a number of issues. Were there times that you both disagreed, perhaps, on principles and policies?
No, he was Republican and I'm Democrat. But, back then it was not nearly as divided as it is today. But he made you understand that I'm a black man. I'm from Jamaica. I'm an African. He made you understand that, regardless of our political views, we are on the same page. We're fighting some of the same battles and that sort of thing. So it was a straight up conversation. My organization has always been nonpartisan. We're a 501c3. And so we talk to anybody who's ready to talk about Africa. So the Bush administration was ready to talk about Africa. So we were there to listen and to see what we could do to support it. So we connected very early in the process. It was not a matter of agreeing or disagreeing. He just wanted to know what we thought about some things. And I was happy to share my thoughts and my perspective.
Yeah, and since we're talking about the consultation he had, with the CFA as he prepared to come to Africa, did you find that he took your counsel at that time, and if it was really helpful to him during his visit here?
Yeah, it was real helpful. One time I was in Sudan trying to stop the conflict, try to get the country somehow to move forward from the sanctions and all of that. I came back the day I arrived back in Washington. I went to see the Secretary of State, Colin Powell, and he was very interested in hearing what I thought about Sudan. He was very interested in, seeking my advice in terms of U.S. recommendations, which he did. And I saw the U.S. policy change as a result of that. So for me, he was clearly a military guy. He was very disciplined, and but his ears were open. He would really listen hard at what you had to say, and he was ready to to accept advice and to move forward if it made sense for him. So I really miss him. He was he is one of the icons of the country, and it feels like it's a hole in our country today, and it seems to crossing all kinds of lines. There's a lot of Republicans, a lot of Democrats, there's young people, there's old people. All of us miss General Colin Powell.
Yeah, and in the last few years, America has been going through a change. The issues of racism, police brutality, all of these have come up, and quite frankly, Mr. Powell's voice would really make a difference at this time. What do you think he would have said, as America goes through this transition of facing its reality, its fears, and its past?
I think he would have challenged us to be better than we are. He was certainly not a person to espouse political dogma. For him, it had to be rational. And I think he would have encouraged America to be rational, to wake up, to embrace all of us. While he was a Republican, he was very much a black man. And so that went against a lot of the things that maybe Republicans were against. He was a strong supporter of Barack Obama, and he was a strong ally, going forward. He would have asked us to be rational, to think as Americans, to think as human beings. Look at the world more holistically. Look at what's going on in Africa the same way we see what's going on in Los Angeles. We're all part of the same planet, and we all better behave ourselves. So I think he would have been very supportive of a rational dialogue for the United States and for the world.
And finally, you didn't find him criticizing serving presidents or past presidents. Mr. Powell was a gentleman to the core. His former boss, George W. Bush, called him a remarkable man. His advice, of course, will be much needed now as America goes through, this relationship it has with Afghanistan and with the withdrawal of U.S. troops. What advice do you think, he could have offered the Biden administration today if he'd been asked?
Well, I think he would be very supportive of this administration. I think he would have been, I'm sure that there were some kind of conversations going on security matters and other matters. But I sense that he would be supportive of the direction of the country under the Biden-Harris administration. And, I don't see him being critical of anything that has been going on for this, since the administration began. There's nothing that he would find, difficult to deal with or support. I think he would have tried to find ways of building the partnerships between all Americans, between Republicans and Democrats, and find common ground so that we can actually move ahead to resolve some of these demanding situations facing our country.
Mr. Melvin Foote, it's been a real pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for speaking to us on The World Today. And once again, our condolences. Back here in Nigeria, the U.S. government is not only fighting terrorism within its territory, but also extending its helping hand to Nigeria in a new move to address global terrorism. The U.S. Deputy National Security Advisor, Mr. John Finner, after a meeting in Abuja with Nigeria's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Jeffrey Onyema, discussed the modalities for the collaboration. Although there are plans for other areas of collaboration, which are tackling terrorism, it has been identified as a common priority for both countries.
This is a hugely important and consequential and close relationship for the United States, and I really want to start just by underscoring that. It is at the center of so many of our shared strategic priorities, from getting our arms around the global COVID-19 pandemic, to climate change, to the democracy agenda that President Biden has championed, to the range of shared security threats that we face, including terrorism. President Biden has been exceedingly clear that our foreign policy really will begin and end with our close collaboration with our partners around the world, and for that reason, as much as any, it is very important that we stay closely aligned on all of these priorities, and why it was so important to travel here.
We had excellent and very fruitful discussions that really looked at all the various areas of cooperation and engagement between Nigeria and the United States of America. We talked about the COVID situation, and in this context, the U.S. has been extremely generous and has just very recently, last week, provided again vaccines to Nigeria, Pfizer and other vaccines, over 3.5 million that were delivered, and I pointed out on behalf of the government of Nigeria how grateful we are to the U.S. government for this generosity. We discussed issues of democracy in Nigeria, and the importance of the U.S. and Nigeria as big democracies to safeguard and democracy and fight for democracy.
Over in the UK, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson today led tributes to David Amess, a veteran lawmaker stabbed to death while meeting constituency voters in an attack that has heightened concern about politicians' safety. The 69-year-old Amess was knifed to death at a church on Friday, October 15th, in Leigh-on-Sea, east of London. At the scene, armed police arrested the 25-year-old son of an ex-media advisor to a former prime minister of Somalia. He remains in custody. They're treating the attack, which Mr. Johnson described as a contemptible act of violence, as a potential terrorism incident. Amess was the second British lawmaker to be killed in 5 years, and his death shocked lawmakers across the political spectrum.
Dedicated, passionate, firm in his beliefs, but never anything less than respectful. This House has lost a steadfast servant. We've lost a dear friend and colleague. And Julia and her children have lost a loving husband and devoted father. Nothing I or anyone else can say will lessen the pain, the grief, the anger they must feel at this darkest of times. We hold them in our hearts today. We mourn with them, and we grieve alongside them. Sir David was taken from us in a contemptible act of violence, striking at the core of what it is to be a member of this House, and violating the sanctity both of the church in which he was killed and the constituency surgery that is so essential to our representative democracy. But we will not allow the manner of Sir David's death in any way to detract from his accomplishments as a politician or as a human being. Because Sir David was a patriot who believed passionately in this country, in its people, in its future. He was also one of the nicest, kindest, and most gentle individuals ever to grace these benches. A man who used his decades of experience to offer friendship and support to new members of all parties, whose views often confounded expectation and defied easy stereotype, and who believed not just in pointing out what was wrong with society, but in getting on and doing something about it.
The death toll is rising in floods in southern India after heavy rains caused rivers to burst their banks. Several houses have been washed away and people are trapped in Kottayam district in the state of Kerala.
This is the moment when the house was swept away by the floods in Kottayam, Kerala state. People standing and watching helplessly as the building on an embankment slipped and fell dramatically into a river on Sunday after the heavy rains lashed the South Indian state. Officials say at least 24 people have been killed, with many others still missing.
13 persons were missing as per our list, and 3 bodies were recovered yesterday, and 9 more bodies today. 12 bodies have been recovered.
A resident describes the extent of the damage caused by the landslides and floods.
Landslide, there are 4 landslides happened there yesterday. The hill behind me, which has brought all the water and other items to the downwards. There are 5 shops here. This is totally washed out.
In hard-hit Kottayam, rescuers raced to clear debris from a bridge with an excavator. Authorities say the Indian Army and Navy were also deployed to carry out rescue missions to evacuate residents. In Patanamthitta district, water from overflowing Pampa River entered houses in the nearby areas, while in Kochi city, fields, shops and houses were flooded with water. Annual rainfall is essential in India as rains support 2/3 of the 1.3 billion population living in rural areas who rely on farming. However, excessive rainfall causes problems like floods, landslides, and waterborne diseases.
As we end the program, Milan and Costa Rica are among winners of the Earthshot Prize, an environmental award created by Britain's Prince William, who has criticized world leaders for an uninspiring response to the climate change crisis. The honors were established to find solutions through new technologies or policies to the planet's biggest environmental problems, with a winner in each of the 5 categories receiving £1 million. Milan won the Build a Waste-Free World Award for its food waste hubs, which recover food to give to those most in need, while Costa Rica received the Protect and Restore Nature Prize for programs paying citizens to plant trees and restore ecosystems. And that's the world today. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.